Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you. As Hrasha has introduced me nicely, I'm Miroslav Milinovic. I work for the University Computing Center, University of Zagreb in Croatia for the last 30 years, so I'm a pretty old one. I'm related to the JANT activities in the area of middleware since JANT 2, and that is over 10 years now on, mostly in Eduroam. Here I represent the whole task that is called Trust and Identity Operations, and I will give you introductory notes also about it. Regarding the training event, it has two parts, and I will do it together with my colleague, Marko Eremija from AMRES, which is Academic Research Education Network of Serbia, who will lead the practical part tomorrow, starting morning at 9 o'clock, I think. So the part one is the more a lecture type, but although it's a lecture type, please, whenever you feel like I'm talking about the stuff that you already know, if you've heard 10 times, rush me, and if you have some questions, do ask some questions, please. I'd like this to be more interactive, so don't be afraid to raise your hand and stop me, ask me for explanation. Maybe your question might be something I can't answer, so be brave. So the part one is introduction to the services, the technology overview, and the service overview. We take it quite seriously, the promise of Eduroam, so we set it up in a way that it's not only the technology, it's the all surrounding around it, so the help to the users and those who provide the service. But you'll see. And the second part is really the training, really hands-on experience, and I'd like to thank the home team that helped Marko to set up the environment for that testing with the equipment and virtual machines and whatever was needed, so thank you guys. And now, because it's an hour and a half, a lot of slides, so let's start the real work. Introduction to JANT Trust and Identity Services. Why on earth we actually do it? As you know, these days we have the demanding community. Education and research community is mobile. Not anymore bricks and mortar, your university, your library, you read there, you learn there, and now nowhere else. So what users need, they need and it's important word, uniform, same wherever they go. Access to their data and to their services, whenever they ask, regardless of the time of the day, regardless of the place where they do it, regardless of the device. So connecting to the network with a mobile phone or with a laptop, notebook, whatever, couldn't care less. I want to access my services. And there is also change in the general perspective of how scientific research is done, how education is done. Today's collaboration and communication is essential. Accessing libraries, sharing data, accessing journal, digital repositories is the way how researchers and educators work. So to a certain extent, being able to download somebody's data and repeat his experiment has become the way of doing things. And for that, you really need a certain infrastructure. You need services that would allow you seamless access and collaboration and communication tools, and it has to be secure. You have to trust them. So the trusted digital identity becomes something that any user needs. That is something that, combined with the appropriate secure technology, allows him to have simple and secure access, but also uniform access to his content and services. Thus, JANT, and you have heard about the JANT. JANT is a network, but also an organization and also a large pan-European project. Among other things, among providing the network connectivity, provides the middleware layer. That is the set of trust and identity services, which are mostly known to you: Eduroam, Edugain, EduPKI, Federation as a service, and the others. Let me briefly inform you about these four. So there is the Eduroam, Edugain, I will tell a few words. EduPKI is something for the certificates on backend. And the Federation is a service, is the newest one, which actually provides the countries which are not able to start their identity service with a helping hand. And we take it really seriously, so we use the ITIL concept in order to improve constantly our services. So what you can, when joining them, you can really rely on the fact that we'll listen what the user need is, and that we will adjust the services to it. In the rest of this training and tomorrow we will use certain terminology. I will repeat it a few more times, but whole this bunch of trust and identity services is related to a certain concept. There is the IDP, identity provider, something that provides the identity, that authenticates the user. On the other hand, there is a service provider, somebody or something that provides the service. So the user uses something that was issued by the identity provider to access resources from the service provider. And service provider actually trusts the identity, trusts what has been sent from the identity provider. So the service provider, the programmers on the service side don't take too much thinking about verifying somebody's identity, about sending his username and password. They rely on that concept. Thus, this is a certain ring of trust, circle of trust, as you have seen on the picture. Some SPs and some IDPs put together a circle of trust. We call it identity. Yes? Yes, yes. This has nothing to do with the IP addresses. No IP addresses. The identities are somewhere or somewhere, not somewhere, with the identity provider. So wherever you are, when you access something, you use your electronic identity to certain technologies, with certain programs, and with that, your SP is able to verify your identity. So no IP addresses, no constraints. So the Edugain, as the biggest trust and identity service we have, actually combines these identity federations in a way that some SPs and some IDPs from some country are connected together, and the space for your users is widened. Aside of the technical part, there is the documentation part, there is the policy that is behind the Edugain. So to join it, you have to have your identity federation, IDPs and SPs of Armenia. Then you join, and for joining, you have to read some international Edugain policy and adjust your services to a certain extent. So why use this at all? Again, higher education identity federations are national scope, but the Edugain itself has a benefit of extending things. Suddenly, your users can use also the services which are provided by other countries. And of course, the users from other countries can use your services if you decide so. If you are interested in this, there are two interesting links here. And by the way, I will leave these slides to Hrasha, so he can share it with the community. You can read them, use them, especially the links are important. So to explain, actually in 4 minutes, which I don't have right now, there is a nice video that explains really what I was talking about in explaining the general model of identity federation and Edugain. And there is some documentation further. So to conclude this introductory part, I have to say, yeah, we have a joint network. On top of the network, we have certain services, Edugain, Eduroam, and on top of that, we also do the development. And this development is actually open to all the joint partners. So if you see yourself, if ASNet sees themselves either in development or in service provisioning, here is the part you can get more active. And of course, there are some complementary infrastructures to joint, like EUDAT, like EGI, or projects like ARC, which actually put all this picture together, ensuring that we have appropriate trust and identity service portfolio for the research community. And this was actually an overview of the whole system. And the Eduroam itself is older than these pictures. It started in 2002 by a brave idea of let's get rid of other things, let's do a proper roaming for the users. For us, when we travel around, and by the way, I'm now connecting to the Eduroam. Congratulations, it works. Marco also. So we have some international traffic right now. So first about the technology. What it is all about. If you want to have a definition what Eduroam is, here it is. It's Eduroam in a nutshell. The objective is build and maintain educational roaming service. Thus comes the name, Eduroam, educational roaming. And by the way, I'm really paying attention to write the word Eduroam in the small letters. A reason is historical one, and I have to ask you to do the same. As some of you or all of you know, the SSID in the Wi-Fi world, in wireless LANs, used to be a case sensitive. So it was not the same if you write down Eduroam small letters or Eduroam with some capital letters. Not to confuse the users, and these days we have millions of users across the globe, we decided Eduroam is all lower letters. So in all the documents we write Eduroam lower letters, it is trademarked with the lower letters, and this is the reason. Historical one, technology is guilty here, but that's the way. So the idea is to provide secure, consistent, and uniform network access service. Like it happened to me. The guys have seen it. I opened the laptop and now I'm online. I can prove it if you want. My mobile phone the same, without any actions of me. So the initial motto was open your laptop and be online, wherever you are, in my office or in Armenia, 4,000 or 6,000 kilometers back from home, where I have never been in your nice country. So it's a good experience for me also. The infrastructure. We have a technical one, which actually consists of certain hierarchy of radio servers, and those who are here with the blocked letters, with the boldface, they are the ones that are controlled centrally. So there are some which are controlled nationally, federation level servers, and the rest is controlled by the local organizations. So to a certain extent, or not to certain, globally, this service is really hierarchical, and it's a good and very distributed. To be good service, it has to be the same quality wherever you go. Same in Armenia and same in London or Paris, same. Otherwise, users have a broken experience. And to make it happen, we built the supporting infrastructure, documentation sites, some database with the general information about all the IDPs and SPs, all the players in the service, monitoring, diagnostics, configuration assistance, all the stuff that is needed to put the service in real life. I will now concentrate on the technology part, and the last part of this presentation will introduce the supporting services to help you launch and maintain the service on a certain level. Why Eduroam? I already said that. My second slide was why trust and identity services. And Eduroam is just the first example, the obvious use case. If I want to access my mail here, I can do it free of charge, free of security issues, because we trust the quality of Eduroam service. And the same experience at home, which is quite important. So we all travel. When you say, but I don't travel internationally. No, it's not always international. This travel is from this building to the other building of your information institute or wherever, from one campus of the university to the other. And yes, users do want transparent and secure network access and same experience. And why it is better for administrators? Just think you don't issue any usernames and passwords for network access as a network admin. That's the job of the identity provider admin, but then there is one identity for one university. And university can have a lot of access places. And when you have guests from other university, from other institutes, you treat them the same. So no additional username and password problem. How it started? Oh, it started in 2002, and here is actually the famous link. There was the Terena Association, doesn't exist anymore, now has the other name, JANT Association, and it has the task force where a bright idea of roaming service have been introduced, and the roaming requirements are in this URL, still available on the network. So the idea was to protect the user, so the identification of a user is unique at the edge of the networks. This means my device knows my identity and my identity provider. No other pieces of equipment actually can verify my identity, and that's good, because you can have as many hops as you would like. You can have a whole hierarchy of transporting servers. No one of them can actually unpack and say, here is his username and password. No way. The other thing is to enable guest usage. So this service has to enable guest usage without additional work of admins. Scalability. From the very beginning, we thought that this service should not put additional burden of local user administration and authentication, and it has to be scalable. It has to rise in any aspects, in number of users, number of service locations, number of identity providers. It has to be easy to install and use. At the most, one-time installation or configuration of a user, and that is the promise that we have right now. So you have to configure Eduroam on your device, more or less. In some variants, you have to install something, but that's part of the configuration process. When we say it has to be open, the selected solution has to be open in the way that it is not connected to any kind of proprietary technology, hardware, software vendors, or whatever. And last but not the least, it has to comply with the privacy regulation. But from the very beginning of the design, Eduroam was perceived as a privacy-preserving technology. Because again, as I said, it's built on the notion that the identity is known only on the edges of the network. And then I will explain later, and tomorrow we can see, you still, in the cooperation between IDP and SP, you can still identify the user directly. So when something bad is done by the user, you can still chase him and know who he is, and when and what he has done. So I'm talking a lot about some terminology, but to be on the same page, authentication is verification of the user's identity. Is the user who he says he is? That is always done by his home institution, by his identity provider, never ever by anybody else. Authorization is, okay, we know it's Miro from Srce, but do we allow him to access the network or not? So this is done by the service provider, by the visited institution. And again, when I say home institution, I mean identity provider. That's the system that provides identity management database. That could be Active Directory of your institution. Somebody uses Active Directory or LDAP directories or any databases, that's it. It's responsible for user authentication. It should interface to radius, to some radius server. It has to have some connection to the radius server. The visited institution is even simpler stuff. Service provider is the name, the synonym, but that's actually the wireless infrastructure and network infrastructure that provides access points or any other network access service. It could be also a switch, so you could do it wired. And it could have, or even not, appropriate radio server that will do the traffic, do the transport of credentials and requests from one point to the other. Yes?
If my service provider will not give me some service, so can I just connect with my home institute with the VPN and to get this access?
Yes. There is one thing that is related to Eduroam. It's called policy. And that is the definition of what is expected from all the players. So it says who has to do what. And there is the list of open ports that should be and must be provided by the service provider. So the minimum, what has to be opened, is defined there. So you can't say I'm Eduroam service provider, but opening only one port, not allowing mail, for instance. You have to do it. If you have some specific things, you can always use VPN from your home institution. And also, if you want to be absolutely secure, I advise you to use the VPN. But even without the VPN, you can use it. And what technology is used for this? So we kind of listed requirements, listed terminology. So what is the technology? No web portals. Web portals are not secure enough. What is secured enough after several years of investigation inside the Terena working forces, we came out with the conclusion that the secure enough is the 802.1x family of standards. So this is ISO standard, and it's a layer 2 port-based access control standard. This means that the access control is done on a lower level than it would be done with the web portals. It's on the network, on the port-based. That would mean that you have better control of what user can do before authentication. Actually, he can do nothing, and that's good. That's secure for your network. So the users are detected at the network's edge, at this place, or at an access server. I don't know where it is, but who cares? And this network edge is network access server, NAS. And that could be either a wireless access point or a switch, so you could have a wired Eduroam. For instance, in Croatia, we have a large, over 10,000 spots wired Eduroam installation in student dormitories. So every student has a bed to sleep, and behind his desk, he has a socket to connect. But to access the network, he has to do the Eduroam authentication. This is the way how the student dormitories made sure that they know which student is doing what on the net. At the same time, they control who is accessing the network and have the security. Students' privacy is covered and so on. So there is also wired network possibility. But okay, let's concentrate on the wireless. So again, back. So we have a NAS. And what else in the technology? Until identity is proven, the concept, the standard actually allows only one type of protocol communication. That's called EAP, Extensible Authentication Protocol. So this is the only traffic that can pass between my mobile phone and access point. Nothing else can go. I can't put in some HTTP packets, some DHCP packet, DNS packet, or whatever. No. Only EAP. And after the authentication, I can continue, or if authentication went bad or an authorization went bad, then I'm doomed. I'm off the net. So everything is blocked at the data link layer. That's secure for the home network, for the visited institution, for the network. So which are the advantages? So we use EAP. EAP actually allows several authentication methods. You can do authentication with TTLS. This means with the normal user name and the password using PAP protocol. Or you can use the same protocol with TLS. This means that user has a certificate, X509 certificate on his machine, and this certificate is used instead of username and password. This is even simpler for the user, maybe more complex for the identity provider, maybe more complex for the user where certificate expires because he has to install the newer certificate. But then you have a PEEP, which goes with the Microsoft, MS Chat, and so on. Secure because this standard actually by default assumes encryption between the endpoints. So all data is encrypted and it's using dynamic keys. So more or less it's not easy to break it, or it's not breakable, but as you know, we constantly improve the security as challenges come up. And it's easy to integrate with dynamic VLAN assignment. That's something that I will repeat several times. But one of the standards in the family is Q, 802.1Q, which actually deals with the VLAN assignment. This means that when you allow the user, when you authorize the user to access your network, you can put him, the IP address of his machine, you can put in the VLAN that you would like, in the virtual line that you would like. So the situation in which you design the network and say, yeah, but if I have only Eduroam in my house, how the intranet will connect to the very sensitive data? No problem. You just identify it's your local users, and you can do it, I will show you how, and put them in your intranet VLAN, and put the guests in the guests VLAN. Finished. As secure as with two SSIDs, and even more because you have one configuration and one control. Less easy to make mistakes. It's scalable. Because we use the radios for infrastructure, that infrastructure is actually very scalable. You can put additional radio servers. You can have a failover. You can have a load balance. You can do whatever you want with that. And at the end of the day, 1.x standards actually presumes there are supplicants, clients on the end users' devices. And they are easy to find and configure, and maybe I should say in this line, they are standard right now. Earlier we would say that there are some clients, some supplicants for the Windows and so on, but these days everything is embedded in the operating systems. In macOS, in MS Windows since version 8, I would say. So we would have that as a configuration matter. It's not a matter of you install some program, it's a matter of configuration. Linux supplicants are readily available, and by the way, mobile devices do support 1.x. iOS does it as a configuration. With Android, you have a little bit more fun. You have to have a special application for handling configuration, but it's not a big deal. Yeah, it is, and my apologies for that. So how this works? This is the picture. They say the picture says things better than the words. So you have a supplicant. Here it is. My machine has some software on it, part of the operating system, but who cares? And this one actually connects to the authenticator. That's access point in my case. Hey, I'm here. Okay, send me an EAP something, and then the supplicant does that. And we negotiate something, and the authenticator informs the radio server about, hey, I have this authentication request. What is your opinion? And radio server looks at the user database and says, I know the guy, let him in. Authenticator says, yeah, you can. And then my machine is granted certain IP address, DHCP, can be used here, certain IP address and other network parameters, and I can go on to internet. You can have several VLANs, employee VLAN, student VLAN, guest VLAN, but one SSID, Eduroam. You don't need other SSIDs. And that's good because when you configure your Wi-Fi, you can concentrate on one SSID, not several of them. So, here is, so the discussion between supplicant and the authenticator is EAP. It's EAP over LAN EAPOL protocol because it's that thingy. And then from authenticator to radius is EAP over radius. So radius is used to send the packages. And then radius can discuss with the user database any protocol. LDAP is standard solution somehow. We have it back. So, user activates his device, attempts to connect to the SSID Eduroam. We still are in the SSID world. Somebody of you have heard about the hotspot 2.0 standard? Okay, so I'm going to skip the comment. NAS detects the new supplicant. Port is enabled to unauthorized. This means only 1.x standard is, traffic is allowed. Other traffic is blocked. No HTTP, no DHCP, nothing. Blocked. NAS sends the EAP request. Supplicant returns. This is who I am. And user actually logs on using Eduroam credentials, regardless of the location. Yeah? NAS forwards this to the identity provider, that means to the radio server, gets back the result, and then port is set to authorized, and the normal traffic is allowed. So you see the points in which the communication between device and the access server start is not the point where you have the access to the network. Now it gets later. This is the value and security of this solution. Okay, but what we are talking about is the fact that the picture I've shown and explained, sorry. Well, this picture is actually the local one. Yeah? But we want to share credentials across the world. How to do that? Simply, use the radius as the transporting mechanism. Radius is a rather old protocol. It was used in telecom industry since the days of, I don't know, bulletin boards, if somebody remembers that. You phone by the modem. You remember what the modem is? You phone by the modem some service, and then it answers back, and blah 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 blah. And radius was used. Telecom industry still use radius for G3 and even for telephone service. So what you do actually is, on this picture, you have a user Tom at institution-1.dk, some Danish guy in let's say Portugal, trying to access the Eduroam network in institution 3. And when the radio server of that institution sees the identifier of that user, he would say, okay, but after @, it says inst-1.dk. That might be Denmark. And by the way, I don't recognize that shape of the username. So let's send this request up to my father, and this is Portuguese top level, Portuguese level server. And the Portuguese level server will say, okay, if that would be another institution for Portugal, maybe institution number 4, I could know. But I see this is from Denmark, so I don't know nothing about the Denmark, but I do know there is the upper server up, and that is Confederation level server, European top level. And that one actually knows that is the Danish server. And the Danish servers actually know where is the institution number 1, and then institution number 1 can respond. You see the red lines back. And this can happen, and actually this happens in a fractions of seconds. So as you have seen, or you have to trust me, but I can show you, I actually authenticated here in a matter of seconds. While machine was booting, I had the Eduroam access. So this works. How? Again, a realm-based proxying, this is terminology if you are searching for literature, for documentation, it's called realm-based proxying. So the username must be in the format user@realm. And realm is actually DNS-like domain name, srce.hr, asnam.am, or whatever. I don't know, terena.org. Yeah? If you have realized this is similar to the DNS, this is not a bad thing, this is right thing, yeah. It looks like DNS to a certain extent. Realm and the radius hierarchy is used to forward requests to the next hop in the hierarchy. So I was at the institution, but the institution doesn't know anything about the users with realm srce.hr, hop, Armenian server, no, this is .hr, I don't know anything about the Croatia, hop, Europe, hey, Croatia, I know where it is, send it to that radius, Croatia via .hr, but Srce, here is the server and back. Institution radio server, so in that respect, communicates only to its federation level radio servers and to its institution NASes. Huh? So this hierarchy is actually quite well organized. The only problem in it is that it uses shared secret, symmetric credentials, symmetric cryptography. It uses symmetric cryptography, so shared secrets. That is something you have to keep in mind. So the shared secrets authenticate other servers in hierarchy. You have to keep them secure. So we have European Confederation servers. There are 2 of them. Radius is actually known for its failover principle, and it could have up to 256. God knows where this number comes from. You know all, but it could have 256 parallel radio servers. So if first fails, second takes over, and so on and so on. So far, we haven't seen a traffic in which 3 servers won't survive, so don't worry. 1 is okay, 2 is actually wanted situation because that means that if 1 is down, the second will take over. That's normal failover. You can play load balancing between them, no problem. If you want, Radius is capable of doing that. So we have 2 top levels, Netherlands and Denmark, and then each of the countries, members, have their own country level servers. Armenia has also. And then each national, we call it federation level server, can have some hierarchy below. So each European top level server accepts requests from the connected countries and also countries from all over the world and forwards them to the appropriate federation level Radius server. This actually means that top level server has certain, you call it routing table, it's okay terminology. So certain table in which domains are connected with certain Radius servers. So the request is forwarded to some country, and what happens then? Then the level of the country, level of the federation top level server, 1 for each national roaming operator, or you might have some resilience or 2, that would hold a list of connected institutions. So again, here is the routing table for my nation, for my country, for my coverage. And then I either forward request to the appropriate institution server, or if it comes to me, I don't know what to do, I send it back to the European top level Radius. And there are some mechanisms that would prevent of looping. I send you, you send me, I send you. There are some mechanisms for preventing that. And at the end, institution level Radius server forward requests from roamers up, and if it is for him, it just makes sure that it should handle it properly, so reply with a proper request. This is whole. Show you the picture, explain it. I think it's easy enough. And then, of course, some things don't follow the nature by itself is not as simple as the basic physics is. So our system is not as simple as the basic technology I explained is. There are some situations in which this realm-based proxying is not working well. These are situations in which you can't really easily provide the realm for an institution. Assume you have an international organization in your academic community, and they say, okay, but our domain is not .am, our domain is .eu, or .org, or .edu, or .net, or any other generic domain. And they refuse to talk to you otherwise. Although this is just for the identity, they feel like their identity has to be there. No? And this realm part of the username is like that. So what to do? In that case, the current solution is you have to put an exception in the routing tables. So the European top level has to know how to deal it, because it will come eventually from any of the Radius server, and the national Radius server has to know about it, and the institution Radius server has to know about. So you have to add an exception. Now you would say, okay, who cares? 1 exception. But have in mind, at this moment we have 89 countries in the world providing Eduroam service. That's thousands of institutions. So what about few hundred of exceptions? What about more? That won't scale. And the routing tables are becoming more and more complicated, and that's actually slowing the process, and we are trying to make it fast. Thus, additional solution has been developed. I'm not saying that you have to run for it right now. Don't do it if you don't have a real intent for doing that, but you have to know about it. It's called Radius over TLS. The popular name is RADSEC. Instead of using Radius over UDP, Radius actually used UDP, and the standardization went towards standardizing Radius over TCP and also adding TLS to it. So instead of connecting Radius server with the shared secrets, Radius servers are actually represented by their TLS certificates. So go away with the IP addresses and shared secrets. For the Radius servers now, they are identified by the TLS certificates. That's the better encryption, of course, and more flexibility, which allows then dynamic discovery. How it's probably better to show you the picture. So assume there is somebody from Luxembourg, some Stefan from the Luxembourg in somewhere in Papua Nova Guinea, far away in Australia, and he wants to connect. Then normally his request would go to the national server of .pg and then to the APAN Asia Pacific server. That would send it to the European top-level server, and that would send it to the Luxembourg server. That would be the old path, but it's gray here. Assume that the certificate that appropriate support for the radius TLS is being installed at the server of Papua Nova Guinea and Luxembourg. That would mean that and the whole concept actually relies on the fact that in DNS you add the NAPTER record, pointer record, which points to the appropriate radius server. So the Papuans know that there is the NAPTER record edu.la equals .lu, and this is the server. So this means that they wouldn't send the request to the upper hierarchy. They would just, due to this information, found, using the DNS NAPTER records, found the appropriate radius server and send it directly through that red line, yeah, to the LU server, and then LU will send it to appropriate place. So by adding TLS support to the national level servers, you are just making one level of hierarchy obsolete. Okay, you can do it at a lower level. So the LU can talk to foo.nl or whatever. But that would mean a bit more work, a bit more certificates, and at the end we don't know how this would scale, because imagine a lot of visitors. That would mean very large table of TLS certificates in your radius server. So before doing that on a large scale, we want to make sure that each and every country actually has enabled TLS interface on their top level server. So if there is a task for Armenians, that would be first see how to enhance your top level server to do the radius TLS. Not to say RADSEC, because the IETF guys would throw stones on me. They want to hear radius TLS. How to do it exactly? Here are the URLs. You need to have the appropriate certificate that's provided by the EduPKI service. What else? There is the wiki. Implementations are more or less RADSEC proxy. That's a very good tool. I can recommend it. That has been developed by the academic community in Europe, actually by Norwegians, but has been accepted and improved by the others, and there is a support for it. If you use commercial tools, then the Radiator is the one, because it has the RADSEC support. Free radius is a little bit limpy, so if you're going to do it, send an email. We're going to help you. Or maybe we won't succeed, but the combination of free radius and RADSEC proxy should work fine. Thank you. And when it comes to ongoing work, we do deployment right now. We are not happy with the deployment status in Europe and globally. And as you have seen, EduPKI is a bit hard to follow, so we are thinking about the Let's RADSEC. That's a new solution, a lighter solution for certificate provisioning than EduPKI-based solution. So that's more or less it. And back to our standard Eduroam. So users' credentials are tunneled through the radius hierarchy. That would actually mean that if your supplicant, this machine, has a certificate of the other side of the identity provider, then the packet goes through the TLS tunnel, and the only place where supplicant will disclose username and the password in the packet would be the identity provider's radio server, the one that has the appropriate certificate. With this technology, man-in-the-middle attack is impossible. And thus, we insist the users to check the certificate of the IDP. So they have to set up the client properly. Okay, they couldn't care less about their security, but we still want them to do. So the user's credentials are tunneled through the radius hierarchy. And security is really important stuff. As I said, recommended approach is TLS and the mutual server authentication, so that is what I was just explaining. The infrastructure looks like this, and the blue rectangle actually explains what is the part that is centrally maintained by the Edugain operations team, and it covers a bit of the federation level servers because we kind of negotiate the configuration of the national servers and make sure that it is according to the standards. And then, of course, on a lower level, you still see what I was showing on the earlier pictures. Authorization, okay. So now we know the user is what he was, but now authorization. Again, just to recapitulate what I already said. So VLANs, not wireless LANs, but virtual LANs, yeah? VLAN in service provider can have different permissions. That's that 1Q standard. And each VLAN can be connected to different part of the campus. So what you can do here is really fine-tune the network access rights you are given to some person by this concept. And then the NAS will assign a client to a certain VLAN. Easy. Concept is easy to understand, and then once you got it, you can implement it. All the radio servers have that, and it's quite useful. I'm repeating that several times because people, as I said, say, okay, I have the SSID for Eduroam, but then another SSID, and then they make I would say organizational mistakes like saying Eduroam is only for guests and the other SSID is for the home people. No. Eduroam is for everybody. And if you want to do some things, try to do it with 1Q standard. So the main components, again, client on the user's device, network access server, that might be an access point or appropriate switch, hierarchy of radio servers following the 1.x and 1Q standards. And here is the full solution. This picture is so famous that it was probably drawn first time somewhere in 2003 or 2004, and since then maybe hundreds of people have shown it in thousands of presentations. Maybe it deserves to be on some wall. So that's the whole picture. If you can remember, half an hour ago I have shown the left side of the picture. Now I have added the right side. Again, the procedure is the same, but if the radio server of University A realizes, looking at the realm part, something to the right of the sign at, realizes this is not his institution, the only thing he does, he sends up the request to the upper layer of hierarchy until there is somebody in the hierarchy who knows how to deal with this realm. And then finally this one finds the University B where the radio server says, this is a request for me, I see at realm such.hr, for instance. Yes, let's look at my user database, at my database backend. Yeah, username, and I open the packet because I have the right, I open the packet, okay, here is the password, do username and password match? Yes, I send a response back, and the response back is accept. It could be accept or reject or discard, throw away. And it goes back to the authenticator that does the final decision, does the accept or reject, and does send the appropriate information to the supplicant. That's it. So for the trust we use radius plus some policy documents. Standards that we use 1.x plus EAP, And then VLAN assignment is something that we strongly suggest to be used. You can survive without that, of course. If you don't have VLANs, you can work perfectly well. So this is the Eduroam. Key technologies again. Security is based on 1.x, standard for port-based network access control. Authentication is based on EAP. You have several EAP flavors. Some of them are mandatory when you use, for instance, Microsoft, then they would say, okay, you have to use PEEP, MSCHAP, but that's also EAP. Some of them are actually a must when you decide to use the certificates. Instead of username and password, then you have to use EAP TLS. If you use usernames and passwords, then you might use EAP TTLS, you may use EAP Fast. These days people talk about EAP PWD, EAP password. We'll see how this will evolve over time. Roaming again is based on radius proxying, and radius is here just used for the transport. We call that intermediate servers radius proxies, aside of the fact there are IDPs and SPs. So, this is it. This is Eduroam technology. Yeah. No, I am not able to monitor the users, although I run the top-level server. Have a look. The radius protocol at the EAP, actually radius sends a packet. But this packet has the inner identity and the outer identity. The outer identity can be anonymous at asnet.am. And this one is the one that is used by all the radius servers in the chain to do this radius routing, navigation of the traffic, okay? I can put still Miro at, let's say, HR, it's okay. Inner identity can be same as the outer identity. But if you are privacy preserving fun, then you put anonymous, it should work. It must work. So it works until the end. And the end IDP server of your institution is the one that does open the whole packet, sees the inner identity where the password is. So nobody actually sees the password. And that is why it's crucial that your client has the certificate of your IDP. So the checkup of the certificates is mutual. IDP will check if the certificate, if the information comes from something on the net. But you have to check if you are authenticated against your IDP or somebody who is trying to steal your it's actually the public key, public certificate of your IDP. And to make this easier, I will show you we have a tool. It's called CAT, Configuration Assistant Tool, and can be used in order to set up your computer easy, or machine or device, whatever. And I mean, all three-letter agencies in the world can listen what we are talking. Probably NSA is listening right now. I couldn't care less about it. I mean, there is a certain level of privacy which, you know, you are guaranteed with that, but as I said, there are agencies that are supposed to know everything about us. Maybe, maybe not. But in regular situations, this is privacy-preserving technology, definitely. The only thing that you have to do is you have to set up your client accordingly. The Eduroam service. So, it started in 2002. Jant 2 had the activity called GLA5. Okay, we are fan of some shortcuts. From 2004 to 2007, the technology was being investigated. Some basic supporting services have been designed, and the service has officially started in September 2008. As you have seen, this is almost 10 years old stuff. So we know pretty much a lot of things about it, and have a lot of stories. The best way to start is www.eduroam.org. Have a look, see what's going on there. In Jant 3 we built a new version of the policy version 2, and ASNet signed also that version of the policy, so I am a full member. You can find it on these links. And we continued further development and infrastructure. And that's going on with the Jean 4. We are now in Jean 4-2, and the 3 comes on, and there are no obvious signs that Eduroam is dying. Actually, when you look at the statistics, we are constantly increasing the traffic and the number of users. There is also the Global Eduroam Governance Committee, which actually does the global governance. Europe is there with the 4 members. And there is the Eduroam compliance statement. Global one, European one is a bit more precise and detailed. And being a part of the European Confederation, you are bound by the European policy. When it comes to the policy, this policy actually regulates the rights and the responsibilities of the European Federation, a confederation of each and every national federation. We call them national roaming operators, although they are similar to NRS in most cases. Institutions that are ISPs and IDPs, and there is something on the users too. For more reading, you have these URLs, and to check the list of the members, actually 47 at this moment in Europe, you can have a look at these websites. We lastly connected Greenland and Faroe Islands, so there are very few places in Europe where Eduroam is not available. Local national Eduroam policies, when the Armenia has to have its own national policy. You could say, okay, our national policy is the top level policy, so European policy, but you are entitled to have your own one. It's good to have your own one, at least for the situations in which an institution comes in or comes out, so everybody knows, okay, here we have a new IDP in the system, or here we have a new SP in the system, and he signed some paper saying, okay, I will obey the European rules or Armenian rules. You can be more specific in your rules. You can ask for, let's say, monthly traffic statistics, if you want, in these policies. The uptake. As for the EduGain, there is very nice video. This video is actually authored by the colleagues Dan Ounder from Australia. I don't think we have a time to have a watch, but yeah, we don't have a time. But if you want, you can see it. Eduroam is more or less, you see the picture, whole world is getting dark blue, especially some continents. Eduroam is these days going outside of the campuses. So you would find it as a service in Scandinavian international airports. You would find it in hospitals in UK. You would find it in some cities in Europe, like Vienna, like Luxembourg, Trondheim, Zagreb, my home city, where the local municipalities decided to use their own Wi-Fi. They have a city Wi-Fi, and because they claim they are university cities, they decided to add one SSID, which will be Eduroam and will be used by the Eduroam users. So when there is the famous Christmas fair in Zagreb, I see a lot of Brazilians, Argentinians, UK people from all over the world, tourists, Japanese, who actually connecting to the Eduroam, maybe not knowing because the iPhone in the pocket is just doing the connection while they are walking across the center of the city. But that's the beauty of the service. You are just connected. You just have the service. It's not like the hotels or some other things where you have to type in username, password, not sure how. Here it is really working. And we also had an experiment, successful experiment, so we had a Wi-Fi in the bus. We had Eduroam in the bus. The bus that was going from the central bus station in Malaga to the campus Teatinos, which is something like 20 minutes drive. And this bus had the Eduroam in it. The biggest problem was to teach the driver in the morning, 5 o'clock, when he starts the bus, how to do it properly. The buses had a 3G and connection, yeah? And we just added the Wi-Fi environment in the bus. But that experiment works, so there were some experiments in other countries, like in the trains in the UK. There are a lot of trains coming from London central stations to Oxford and Cambridge, full of academics. Yeah? It would be nice to have the free and standard Wi-Fi access. So they did some experiments there. I don't know how this ended, but yeah, the next step they say is the International Space Station. Maybe Russians and Americans would be good enough to provide us with the connectivity. We'll see. So wherever you have the network connectivity, you could bring an idea of wireless. You can bring the Eduroam. That's the message. And yeah, these are the figures. The national traffic is compared 2015-16 to 2016-17. So September to August period, but 2 different years. As you know, we are scholars, so there are some ups and downs. Sometimes we want to pass the exam, so we are active. And during the holidays, yeah, we tend not to connect to Eduroam. We tend to connect to other people. So you see these ups and downs are normal stuff. But have a look. This is a sample of 30 countries in Europe. National authentication, the blue columns. We are talking about over 200 millions of authentication in a month. And it just works. On the other hand, international traffic. Have a look. We are talking about almost 50,000, over 50 million of authentications in international traffic. So people do cross the border. But what can you learn from that? There is 1 to 10 ratio. Eduroam is used inside the country 10 times more than international. And bear with me, this national is only national roaming. These figures don't include the people who are sitting in their own institution. Remember the design. That is done by the same radio server, so you can't see that statistics in the upper logs. So you are not doing Eduroam for the sake of the guests from abroad like me and Marco. You're not doing Eduroam for your, I don't know, distinguished professors who travel abroad to do the lectures. You're actually doing Eduroam for yourself when you move from this building to the other building in the city. That's the point. We have 89 NROs globally, 47 of them are Europeans. There are 26 pilots also, so by the end of the year, I hope we will celebrate 100 of countries in Eduroam. The next is to have more members than United Nations, but that would be a bit hard to do, hard act. We have a central database in which those who want could send the information about their service locations. And in that we have over 21,000 of registered service locations. So over 21,000 places where you can Eduroam. This building is hopefully one of them. In the registration, we can check them up later. Out of that, over 15,000 are European ones. And data is actually provided not by all countries, only by 68 of them. Some of them are lousy. They don't provide a correct, full information, just a part of it. So how the service is organized? This is the less technology, more like explanation of how we do the work. There is the Eduroam SG, Eduroam Steering Group, where Armenia also has one seat. These are all national roaming operator representatives, which actually govern the service or have monthly meetings, and we discuss what's going on and can we improve the service, who has the problems, and how to help. Then there is the Confederation level service provided by the operational team, which actually relies on the national Eduroam service provided by the appropriate NRN or national roaming operator. So in that sense, for the status of Eduroam in the country, the first place where to ask what's going on is your national roaming operator, that is ASNAM in this case. They should have the answer. And if not, and if they need help, they can ask the Eduroam OT. That's the way how the things do work. Because we have something like a service stack. There is the operational team. It's less than 10 of us, actually 5. And there is the federation level personnel. That is 47 countries multiplied by 5, so that's 300 people. And there is institution level personnel. That is how many service providers and IDPs we have in the database. That is probably 30,000 multiplied by 3, so we are talking about hundreds of thousands. And end users, see the previous picture, end users are counted in the millions. So to support all of that, we had to build such a hierarchy, because if every end user would call a central help desk of Jant, then that won't fly. And by the way, it won't fly for the reason, as I explained earlier, you have to set up your client according to your local IDPs. So this client, or this machine, to be connected to the Eduroam, I had nothing to do with ASNAM, okay? This is configured according to the rules of my home institution, and it just works here because we share the same technology and same solution. The user support scenario, here is the picture, but more or less remember the famous old sci-fi film E.T. How the E.T. solved his problem. Phone home. Sadly, this is the same thing the Eduroam user could do. Phone home. So how we instruct our users is, okay guys, if it doesn't work, user, you see him in his pinky color. If it doesn't work, he calls home and says, hey guys, I can't connect, help me out. And then they would say, okay, you stupid person, you are entering wrong password, or I see that it is not working because la 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 blah blah blah, or I can't see anything, I will contact for you, I will contact the local admins in the visited institutions like here. Yeah? And of course, if it fails, then you introduce the federation level admins, and if they fail to, then the OT steps in and checks the European top level logs to see where the traffic is broken. More or less 99.9% of the problems are on the end user's machine. The rest is the local setup in the visited institution. We had, in 10 years, we had on so many accidents in which the federation level servers were not acting properly. So, not to be mentioned. So the problem is the user. And our further development is with the tools that will do the automatic diagnostics. We don't have them right now. But the diagnostic that would phone home without me knowing that I have done it, that it done it, so to help the user to overcome the problems as soon as possible. You know, if an American has the problem right now here, his guys are sleeping. So what can he do? Yeah? He can wait until it's dark here, and then he wants to sleep, but yeah, they are awake. So it's not always easy due to the language, due to the time barriers, but also to the language barriers. So phoning home is a good solution. Our supporting infrastructure, we call it supporting infrastructure, but also supporting services suite, is based on the Eduroam web and the wiki site. Eduroam web is for general population, I would say, and the wiki is more towards helping admins on each and every level to improve the service, to build it. There is also supporting services portal, monitor.eduroam.org, where you could get some information about the content of the database, monitoring, metering, maps. The first level support, so if in doubt, the place where to call is help@eduroam.org. They will answer. In most of the cases, they will tell you, here is the responsible person for Armenia, please contact him. There are contact places for the SG members, and there is also open list for the Eduroam development. So if you feel like I want to contribute, here is the list, development@list.eduroam.org. Subscribe. You can follow at the beginning, but later you can help us to make the service better. I will talk about Eduroam Database and the other stuff in a few minutes. So the supporting services suite actually has this idea of having the database in the center, core services, and then providing certain elements of support to the different user groups, to the federation operations, to the SPs, to the IDPs, to general public, to the end users, maybe to the decision makers, maybe to those who want to know everything about us, whatever. So the portfolio wants to meet the need of all the user groups. So if you feel like, this is missing, let us know. And the core thing is the Eduroam database. And data there is provided by the national roaming operators. So if you are with the national roaming operator, if you are with the ASNAM, don't be surprised if you get an email from me or somebody else from the OT saying, hey, please, adjust your data. It looks outdated. Because data is coming from the NROs. So we have sometimes problem with the completeness of the data, and we're also trying to make them as open as possible. So we are preparing the new version of the database format, which will identify the data that can be publicly shown, provided in the open access format, and we're going to do it. Currently what we have the maps and monitoring and metering information on the monitor.eduroam.org. We have the configuration assistant tool called CAT, yes, and some protected pages with Eduroam and social network-based authentication that would provide the interface to the web for the national roaming operators, testing on demand scenario, and CAT for admins and some other stuff. Let me briefly explain. The Eduroam database includes all information about the national roaming operators, about the local institutions, SPs and IDPs, and about Eduroam hotspots. Thus, we produce maps, KLM Google Maps, with the all hotspots. Very useful tool for the admins, but also for the users to see where is the next hotspot. So if you plan to travel somewhere, you can have a look and see which are the places where you could expect the Eduroam to be provided. There are some information about the monitoring in it and about the usage of the service in the database. Again, NROs are responsible to provide the necessary data, and data must be provided in the agreed XML format, and here is the URL for the ASNAM to check the data specification. By the way, the new database specification will be soon released, and by the end of the year it will be in transition period. Here are the maps. I don't know if you have time to check them out, but users can have a pretty good view on the map to see how many of the service providers are there in some place, or how many of service locations are in some city and so on. So you could really depict where the Eduroam is available or not. The monitoring part, it's crucial to monitor the functionality of the Eduroam infrastructure. As you know, we would be happiest to monitor the user experience. So to monitor the end user experience, it means that we can monitor the last mile also. Currently, we do the monitoring only of service and infrastructure, but the last mile is under development. As you could see from the picture of a device that claims to be the Eduroam probe, so something that you could put somewhere in your environment, and that one with a certain amount of electricity and the network connection can verify the quality of the Wi-Fi and Eduroam in your organization in that space. What is currently being done can be seen on monitor.eduroam.org, and here you would see, I've just checked before this, that Eduroam, that the federation level servers in Armenia work fine, so good to know. Also, as a user, I verified that. How this monitoring concept work, maybe it could be nice to know. So there is the monitoring client which sends the requests, and somebody has to answer them. And based on this answer, you get the positive or negative result. We do two-step process, reject and accept, because as these are two different logics in radio servers, one might work and the other also might not. So for both steps, client creates radius attributes, sends the request, with selected authentication type, for instance, EAP TTLS, PAP. And then monitor radius proxy handles this and returns the response. And client updates the database. For instance, you can send such a, from monitoring client, you can send such a request to the European top-level servers and Federation top-level servers. This is what we call server monitoring, but we also have infrastructure monitoring, where we produce a request for, let's say, Armenia, but send it to the top-level server to see if the top-level server will find the Armenian server and if the response will come back. And there is something that we allow only to the registered operators of the national roaming servers. That's called testing on demand. That is a situation in which somebody can issue a request for the realm B, but from the realm A. So you say, okay, I want to see how the traffic will go from Croatia to Armenia. So you say, the first realm is, I select the server in Croatia, and I want to see the response from the realm in Armenia. And then the server sends the request to the Croatian server, but with the realm of Armenia. It has to go through all this infrastructure part. And this testing on demand is not available to the ordinary users. You have to log on into the monitoring.eduroam.org to see that on the menu. Because we thought that if ordinary users discover that tool, it might be a lot of traffic. Metering. I showed you nice pictures of how much traffic there is. There is the way of collecting status statistics. It's a very simple one. It's based on the syslog. If you are familiar with the Linux operating system, you know there is something like syslog. The basic principle of sending so to say, simple text lines after some action in the system. You see the message format here. There is the basic format and extended format. The both format actually contain information about the realm visited country and the result. And of course, the home country is sending that. The important stuff here is that with these ticks, we can actually know not who was where, but we can actually know how many users were in some country coming from some other country, or even coming from some other institutions. That's very nice statistics. Some of that is publicly available at monitor.eduroam.org, but some is protected for the use of admins because it provides the more sensitive information, like how many users from this institution are roaming to the other institutions. And so it can drive some conclusions, and people are not happy to let it flow around openly. We'll see how and when it will really happen. But for instance, this picture is also a live picture. It shows the traffic from one country to the other. So how many guests are coming to that country? That was during the TNC in Czech Republic in Prague. So you see a lot of people from Europe are coming to Prague. This is live thingy. So if you visit that website, you can have a look at, see, I don't know if we have time, we have to finish in 5 minutes. So so I cannot show you the appropriate thingy. The cut. Do I have 5 more minutes to finish? Thank you. So there is a cut tool. Cut is a configuration assistance tool. It has been in production since March 2013. It's built to help users and IDP admins. What the cut does, it generates installers, configuration profiles for the users. So if you are the cut user, it's easy to get the configuration, appropriate configuration with the certificate, with everything. Why cat? Again, we have 20,000 hotspots. We have in cat at this moment almost 2,000 supported IDPs globally. We had over 4 million of profile downloads in last year, last 12 less than 12 months, May 2016, August, a bit more than 12 months. So this 4 million means at least 2 million of new users. Let's say everybody downloads twice for 2 devices maybe. So if you are not using the CAT, consider that. That's a good stuff. And it's very important, as it is written on this slide, that with CAT, users are automatically forced to set up the certificate for their IDP. So they are protected, their security is at the highest possible level. Again, it's easy to do for the IDPs. You just enter in all of the parameters needed and your certificate. It actually checks if the configuration makes sense. It checks the certificates. So as an IDP, you can almost be illiterate. You just follow and adjust. If it says, hey, this is not good, try to improve. And for the user, it's even worse. It's even easier. You just click and follow, and it will be installed. For some platforms like macOS or iOS, it's really a click and that's it. For Android, you have to download the Android app from the Android Play Store, from the Google Play Store. For Windows, it depends on the Windows version. For 10, it's just a configuration. For 7 and Vista, you have to click once or twice more, but it's not a big deal. Again, there is the end user interface, simple as it could be. Select your institution and select the appropriate platform. Administrator interface, again, very helpful, and even adding some kind of a diagnostic tool so the admin can realize if all the things are done properly. And how to join? You join by a nation, so Armenia has to decide to use the CAT. Your NRO actually enrolls then IDPs and invites you. You get the invitation email, you log in, and that's it. When you log in, you can use your either EduGain identity. You don't have it right now, but you can use the social networks. So you can use the Facebook, Google, LinkedIn. Last but not the least, there is the Eduroam Managed IDP service. What's that? What on earth is that? So let's assume you have the Wi-Fi network, but by no means you have the possibility to set up the IDP. So I was nicely selling you the CAT, but I don't have the user database. So what can I do? The Eduroam Managed IDP actually provides that infrastructure for you. So the target group are institution administrators who don't have the skills or capacity to run their own radius IDP infrastructure. I want to use the Eduroam. I know how to set up the Wi-Fi part, but I don't have the right knowledge, skill, or capacity. This means the number of people to maintain it. How to handle that? And then the end users in such an institutions are in a position that they could use Eduroam. And of course, the national roaming operators who wants to have more and more IDPs in their countries would like to use it. So what we offer is we will give you the technical part of the IDP. So you could create and change the users, provision, revoke, expire credentials, provide statistics information. All this will be given to you. But we don't give you the liability. So you are still liable for the users. Whatever they do wrong, you have to identify them and do whatever is needed in that cases. So the liability is still with the person that opened the accounts and with the user that has taken the account. These accounts can be user 1, user 2, user 3, who cares? You are the one who has to know who is behind the user 1, that Hrasha is behind the user 3, or whatever. So eligibility, yes, your NRN is definitely eligible for this. Again, it's following the Eduroam CAT way. NRO admin says, okay, we want to do it. Then she can enable his IDPs to do it properly, and then you have to inform them they are invited and things go on. And last of my slides, and thank you for your patience. The technology behind it is actually EAP-TLS. So the users are provided with certificates. These certificates are to be installed on the machine. When they expire, user will get an information to renew their certificate. But more or less, there are no username and passwords here. The CAT is used, thus user just download from a different CAT interface the profile and put it on their machines. The authentication is done by a special radius IDP server, or actually set of servers. So Realm is a very complicated one. It has something specific for the institution, TLD. Here it would be AM, and then hosted.eduroam.org. And so you can even host that if you want. You can take that radius infrastructure to your national roaming if you want, or we can have a failover or load balancing. This is open to the discussion. Also, people are considering the possibility of revoking certificates, so we're going to run OCSP responder at the top level, at the operational OT Eduroam operational team will take care about it. So we're going to make sure that if you revoke somebody's right to use the Eduroam, that this is covered. And more or less, this is it. And by the way, if you need to learn more about it, cat-pilot.eduroam.org is the place where you kind of can see the pilot version of the managed IDP service, and here is the link also for the documentation. And with that, I thank you for your patience. I hope it was really interesting because you stayed so much time with me, maybe a bit more than planned originally. And by the way, Marco and I would really love your feedback. Here is the URL, and if you could fill it in after tomorrow, of course, but I will send the slides to Hrasha. So thank you very much.